Staking has been the most detrimental form of utility that has ever come to NFTs. Why is that? Let's check that out. Jumping right into it, we are primarily looking at Solana staking NFTs versus other blockchains such as Ethereum, Aptos, Near, Polygon, and the rest. Reason being, I have expertise in Solana over all the others. So moving straight to the first section, what is staking? So staking has been around now for probably just over a year, but really popularized in the last 8 months. Staking rewards holders for not listing their NFT on a secondary market. This allows floor prices of projects to be able to skyrocket as there is less listings, thus the supply and demand drives the price in an upwards direction. Often we see staking being rewarded through tokens. This can either be from a token created by the project or sometimes a token adopted by other projects or even a cryptocurrency itself. A widely known example that has been happening in the last months with this is Bonk, the meme coin that came out of Solana. Similar to cryptocurrencies, tokens have a finite supply, meaning that they will never increase the amount of tokens in circulation. With tokens having a finite supply, the way NFTs normally tackle this challenge is by something called halving schemes. Similar to Bitcoin, where it halves every 4 years based on its earning rate for mining, NFTs will have halving rates on how many tokens they are rewarded for staking. Tokens are then normally put on to a DEX such as Radium, Jupiter, whatever it is, and they can be traded by other users, often using a liquidity pool to back the investments, or sometimes it is purely supply and demand based. Whilst it has been a widely popularized form of utility, there is a lot of flaws with tokenization and staking. Let's check out some of the key flaws that I see daily with staking in Solana NFTs. More often than not, staking is used as more of a hype bump for creators or founders to get an influx of more royalties or to actually palm off their utility. A lot of NFTs are created through the idea of an art and community, but then lack the forms of utility. Staking has provided a way for those NFTs to almost palm off the utility by creating tokenization. Initially, holders would be rewarded for just holding their NFT. Holders often see this as a great reward and it feels like they're being paid dividends. The issue that this creates is often there is no supply or demand for this token. Furthermore, staking actually creates a very elastic pricing based on that token. We have seen this through things such as Best Buds. Seen this through NFTs such as Best Buds. Best Buds and Mary Jane's were actually under the All Blue incubator by the Stoned Ape crew. They tried to capture a larger audience and utilize a singular token, creating utility for that token, each in their own, boosting the rigidity of the token and the strength of its use. The issue that this posed, especially with the All Blue incubator system, is that the supply and circulation continually increased as more and more people staked their NFTs and held their tokens. The issue was there was no ways of actually utilizing that token to create any burning forms. When we talk about burning, we're talking about completely disintegrating the token, which means there is less supply on the market, so it can equally match the demand or drive the price in an upwards direction. As we have seen time and time again with projects such as Suteki, staking is used to create that hype and to palm off the utility. Suteki actually released staking the day after they released their NFT. This caused a massive uproar in initial hype, but then followed by a large plummet, almost acting as a pump and dump scheme. One thing to note is with tokens being a finite supply, NFT creators don't often understand the economics behind the tokenomics, meaning that they create tokens to be distributed over 1 to 2 years. When you look at a lifespan of a project, they've instantly decided that that's as far as it will go. With people using tokenization as a form of utility, it ends up causing the supply to get far out of hand and thus plummets the floor price of the token. And as we've spoken about before about the elasticity, it thus causes the NFT to fall, just creating and destroying the entire pyramid scheme that they have set up. Although there is plenty of ways to utilize staking correctly. Before I dive into these points, I would like to point out projects that have done it well, and it is actually the reason that a lot of people are trying to implement staking is because they want to mirror the success of these projects. One of note is Blocksmith Labs. We're a big fan of Blocksmith Labs. We love their founders, love their community. So wanted to give them a shout out. But the main reason I actually speak on them is not for our love for them, but how they have implemented their burning and use cases for their utilities. Blocksmith Labs is a very tool-focused and tool-driven NFT. They are continually creating tools, and the way for you to utilize those tools, such as Raven, which is a rating service, you actually utilize their token, forcing people that don't even own the NFT to go onto Radium, Jupiter, or any other DEX to go and buy this token and then utilize it through the tool, thus burning the said token. In this case, we are talking about Forge, and this actually keeps the supply and demand in check. One of the best ways to actually keep tokenization from imploding, which is more than likely the outcome for 90 to 99% of projects, is to have an established and mature business. We at Buddles like to compare NFTs to businesses more often than not because they share so many similarities. An analogy I'd like to use in a Web 2 sense is you would not start taking profits out of a business after your first sale. Normally what happens is you keep rolling over that profit to keep the business growing until it reaches a point of maturity. Please see a business maturity cycle for reference. So once you have a mature business and it is no longer growing at a rapid rate, it has formed a stable plateau, there is a few things you can do. Buyback schemes give you an opportunity to use profits from that business to go and buy the tokens that are currently circulating in supply, burn them to always keep the supply and demand in check. For reference, for those that have not done economics or anything of that sorts, supply and demand is the driving force or the driving nature for any price. And it is a very simplified way of looking at things, but often a very effective way of looking at things. If the demand is higher than the supply, price will incline. If the supply is higher than the demand, price will decline. The sweet spot is finding where supply matches the demand. That is the correct value for whatever you are selling, distributing, or using. So some things that we see far too often in this industry is something we like to deem Ponzi-nomics. And we call it Ponzi-nomics because a lot of these times, as we said, people utilize tokenization as a way of skipping out on utility or not having to think about the broad plan of the NFT. But when they create the tokenomics, they have no indication of economics, as we said before. So they create tokens in vast supply that is distributed far too quickly with no forms of burning or anything, causing the entire system to implode, as we've said before. So you need to incorporate very robust burning mechanisms to always make sure that supply and demand balance is within check. Another form of doing this will be to continually add to the liquidity pool. So when a token is backed by a liquidity pool, it means the token has an intrinsic value. By increasing the intrinsic value of the token as it comes at a higher rate than the circulation of supply is increasing, means you'll have an upward momentum on price or even a plateau. Plateau in tokenization is actually a beneficial thing, as you have the exact amount of tokens you are earning each and every day, week, month, however it is set up for your NFT, with a known value for it. This, although does keep the floor price very elastic unless you can move the token price upwards. We like to think about tokenization as a Web3 approach to dividends, such as shares and stocks. So within something such as the S&P 500 or the ASX, the Australian Stock Exchange, what they do is after the end of the year, so annually or biannually, they would release dividends to their holders if the company has reached maturity, made enough profit, and can spare it. This keeps the shareholders very happy as they have a form of passive income. Although this does not happen in a day. Often it takes 5 to 15 years before a company will start paying dividends. This is for an appropriate reason. Getting short-term passive income, though that's an oxymoron in itself, passive income should be a long-term thing. But getting short-term passive income for the sacrifice of your capital gains is never worthwhile. Make sure that you're always looking at NFTs as more of a capital gains mover rather than a passive income. Being in such a volatile industry, they are more than likely never going to be a great passive income vehicle. So now that we have covered our tokenization, Ponzi-nomics, utilizing it in the effective ways, I'd like to give you guys a visual representation of how most NFTs function from mint all the way through to tokenization. So here we have a mint distribution pie graph. Nothing crazy, nothing too robust. A lot of the time there's a lot more aspects that go into this, but for the sake of this analogy and this visual representation, we'll keep it simple. So down below there is a legend of all the different fees or areas that people normally chuck the mint money to. Keep in mind, this is not what we're doing at Buddles. We are taking a completely different approach. So as you can see there, right off the bat, you have the founder's cut and the launchpad fees, taking about 40% of the initial mint funds. What this means is if you had a collection of 100 different NFTs and they're all worth one sol, the moment you mint, they've already taken out 40% of that whole NFT's worth for nothing. Launchpad fees do, in hindsight, mean a lot more of a stable launch, and that is a very standard approach. So do not worry more about the launchpad fees, but often or not, founders take a very large cut of that mint distribution. This segment that I have pulled out of this pie graph actually represents the liquidity pool. So if a project wanted to appropriately use tokenization, they'll often put a liquidity pool backing it. As you can see, this liquidity pool is worth about 20% of the overall mint distribution, which isn't a crazy amount, but is nothing to scoff at. The issue that arises here is people often ask when staking, when are we going to get our dividends for paying, our initial mint fund and being here. This is something you cannot rush, and this is what I want to emphasize here is once you see all the funds that are taken out, you need to use the rest of the funds to create some revenue streams or different avenues to make revenue. If you were to take this 20% and put it in a liquidity pool, all that you've done is you've bought a project for one sol, and you're slowly going to be earning back your 0.2 sol over the next 2 years. It doesn't make a lot of sense. You can get a far better return on even just staking your Solana with nothing. So this is why we say you're going to have to play capital gains. When you look at an NFT that incorporates tokenization, I often like to think that they put a use by date in. We move on to the next slide, I'll show you what I mean. So, the title here is Do Not Let Them Fool You. Often or not, they've fooled themselves, so it is not an intentional thing, or for a lack of better words, they don't know any better. So, one thing I'd like to say is staking can be the most detrimental form of utility. When a project says they're coming out with staking, don't rush to their doorstep, kiss their feet to try and get an NFT, as it can actually mean the complete opposite in terms of growth. You have to suss out all the plans behind these tokenizations to ensure that it's a robust plan. And if they're not willing to share this, there is an issue in itself. Now, one thing I want you guys to think about deeply is the moment someone puts a tokenization or a staking implementation into their NFT, I like to think that it's put a use by date on that NFT. It now has a finite amount of time before staking will be completed, and often it is not easy to move out of staking once you start it. People will be unhappy as they could have sold their token at a high, but they're still holding because they believe in the project. This causes a lot of issues in terms of the long-term viability of NFTs. Be vigilant. Make sure that people aren't fooling you by bringing up fake utilities and just saying staking. Utility actually is a use case of that tokenization and actually causes an effect of a rope burning at both ends. They constantly have to implement more and more utility to keep the token supply low. This is why Buddles is taking a different approach. And without diving too much into Buddles, we are actually wanting to set up our robust revenue streams, diversification, and Web 2 businesses before we even think about implementing staking. This will ensure that our token value will continue to go up as we grow, and thus the floor price of the project will. A lot of the times when staking is implemented, it will halt your capital gains from that NFT. Be vigilant, be smart. Thank you for watching. I'm sure we'll catch you around in the Discord server. Much love, and watch out for the orbs. They're coming very soon.